Every few years, a series takes the internet by storm. In 2013, it was Attack on Titan. In 2021, Demon Slayer. And now Solo Leveling is stepping up to be the next global sensation. And honestly, it deserves it. With its breathtaking art, action-packed story, and one of the most badass protagonists in all of Manhwa, Solo Leveling is a spectacle. Even its critics can't deny the sheer aura that jin-woo gives off. He's a character that exudes strength. He has a cool design, unique abilities, and an endless amount of moments that just screams dominance. It's no wonder why Solo Leveling is the poster child for what power fantasy is supposed to be. But what if I told you there's another manhwa, one that's just as good, if not better than Solo Leveling, and that is getting an anime adaptation next season? Enter the beginning after the end. Written by Turtlemy, The Beginning After the End began as a web novel in 2016 before getting a full-color webtoon adaptation in 2018. And let me tell you, this series took off. With its intricate world-building and compelling characters, it quickly became the most popular series on Tapas, one of the biggest manhwa platforms on the internet. The story follows King Gray, a ruler from a world where strength is everything. Through his impressive swordsmanship and determination, he climbed to the very top. Feared, respected, and utterly alone. Because while power brought him dominance, it never brought him happiness. But then, in true isekai fashion, he dies and is reincarnated into a new world, but this time as Arthur Lewin. Here, he's born into a loving family, and with the mind of a veteran warrior trapped in the body of a child, he has his second chance. A chance to live life differently. And unlike his previous world, this one is filled with magic, mythical creatures, and powerful noble families, making the possibilities endless. Now let's talk about what really makes or breaks a story. The main character. And let me make one thing clear. I love jin-woo. From the moment he gets to the system, we're taken on an action-packed thrill ride. His transformation from the weakest hunter to the strongest being on the planet is one of the most hype-inducing glow-ups in fiction. The sheer dominance, the cold stares, the effortless flexing, Jin-woo is the definition of power fantasy done right. But there's one problem. While jin-woo is undeniably cool, he can sometimes feel one-dimensional. His character arc is mostly about getting stronger, and while there are some emotional moments, they're not a major focus. He's the type of protagonist you watch because he's unstoppable, not because you relate to him. Meanwhile, The Beginning After the End gives us a protagonist who, despite being in a power fantasy, somehow feels real. One of the best things about Arthur is that despite being a prodigy and incredibly strong, he isn't some edgelord who constantly flexes his power. He knows how to play the game. When faced with royalty, he bows his head and navigates through politics with the tact of someone who's been through this before. He doesn't just throw his weight around and expect kings and queens to kneel before him. Instead, he uses caution and wit, fully aware of the consequences that come with power. Not just for himself, but for his family. But don't get it twisted, Arthur isn't a pushover. When push comes to shove, he's ready to burn the whole world down to protect his loved ones. But unlike a typical reckless power fantasy protagonist, he's mature enough to know when to fight and when to negotiate. And speaking of maturity, let's talk about something a lot of power fantasy protagonists fumble: romance. Arthur, like most overpowered main characters, attracts a lot of girls. Family friends, princesses, elves, you name it. But instead of diving into some weird harem situation, looking at you, jobless reincarnate, he actually thinks like a rational human being. He acknowledges that despite his young body, he has the mind of a 30-year-old man. Reciprocating romantic feelings for literal children? Yeah, he's not doing that. In fact, he actively makes a conscious effort to reject them, which is honestly pretty refreshing to see in this genre. But what really keeps me invested in the story is how it constantly references Arthur's old life. Unlike most reincarnation stories where the old life barely matters after the first few chapters, The Beginning After the End constantly drops crumbs of Arthur's old life as King Gray. His morals, traumas, and lingering regrets all shapes how he behaves now. He's not just some power fantasy, wish fulfillment character. He's someone trying to navigate a second life while carrying the weight of his first. He makes mistakes, he doubts himself, and he struggles with the responsibilities that comes with strength. And that's what makes Arthur Lewin so damn good. Okay, so if the most important thing for a power fantasy is to have a good MC, then the second most important thing is to have a good world to explore. And this is where the beginning after the end completely outshines Solo Leveling. Let's be real, Solo Leveling's world building is bare bones. The story takes place in a modern world where portals suddenly appear, spawning dungeons and monsters. Beyond that, there's not much depth. Sure, there's some government involvement, some guild rivalries, and a plotline about the system going on in the background, but other than the last point, none of that truly gets fleshed out. The world exists as a backdrop for jin-woo to flex his strength, and honestly, that's fine. The series was never meant to be a deep, lore-driven story. It was always about watching one man completely annihilating everything in his path. But the beginning after the end, completely different story. The beginning after the end gives us a fully realized world with different kingdoms, racial divides, political struggles, and secret factions that all play a role in a larger narrative. There are entire histories behind each kingdom, wars that shaped the continent, noble families vying for power, and racial tensions between elves, dwarves, and humans that actually matter in the story. And like I said before, the beginning after the end does not forget about Arthur's past life. As the story progresses, we get more and more glimpses into just how different his previous life was. Instead of a medieval fantasy world, his old life was a futuristic dystopian society. I can keep going on and on about how great the world building is by discussing the higher beings in the series, or how there are greater threats out there than what Arthur may first realize, but that would be getting into spoiler territory. Just trust me, the deeper you go, the more you realize just how expansive this world really is. Alright, so up until now, I think I've made it pretty clear. I'm actually a big fan of Solo Leveling. It was the series that introduced me to Manhwa, and I remember being so impatient to know what happens next that I had to pick up the light novel. But as much as I love Solo Leveling, I think we can all agree, if there's one aspect of the series that deserves criticism, it's the side characters. Let's be real, whether it's the S-Class hunters, his friends, or even his love interest, they rarely get meaningful development. The story is always about Jin-woo's next power-up. And because of that, the people around him feel more like background decorations than actual characters. And I get it, it's literally called Solo Leveling. But come on, how many of you can actually name more than a handful of characters other than his shadows? Meanwhile, in the beginning after the end, side characters are integral to the story. They shape Arthur's journey in ways that actually matter. A perfect example is his family. Slight spoilers, but we find out that Arthur was an orphan in his past life. This completely recontextualizes his deep attachment to his parents in this world. He's not just a typical I love my family protagonist. His fear of losing them is rooted in his past trauma, making his interactions with them far more meaningful. And unlike a lot of fantasy protagonists who set off on an adventure and barely think about their family again, Arthur's parents stay prominent throughout the story. And it's not just his family, his rivals, friends, and mentors all play major roles. Unlike in Solo Leveling, where characters exist just to prop up Jin-woo, Arthur's rivals actually have their own arcs and struggles that contribute to the story. Even if they can't always match his raw power, characters like Elijah and Lucas aren't just there to make Arthur look good, they actually matter. And sorry to keep bringing up how the beginning after the end doesn't forget about Arthur's past life, but seriously, it's so rare for an isekai to actually make the protagonist's old life matter. Anyways, slight spoilers again, but eventually Arthur reveals his true identity as King Grey to someone very close to him. And the reaction is raw, emotional, and incredibly human. A lot of stories would have brushed off a reveal like this in a single chapter, but the beginning after the end actually treats it as a huge moment with real lasting consequences. This was when I realized just how well the beginning after the end handles personal connections, and why its relationships feel so much stronger than those in other manhwas. And finally, I'd be lying to you if I wrapped up this video saying the beginning after the end was a 10 out of 10 masterpiece that was going to change your life. If I'm being completely honest, it took me about 30 plus chapters before I even started liking this manhwa. The only reason I stuck with it so long was because my friend wouldn't stop hounding me to read it. And I'll be real, the early chapters, they're rough. The art at the beginning was very lackluster, especially compared to Solo Leveling, and more importantly, I feel like the story missed a lot of emotional beats early on. A few characters get introduced just to get killed off right away, and while there's supposed to be emotional moments, we never get the chance to get invested into them. And listen, I've been on the Reddits, I've seen the previews, and I know people aren't exactly hype about the animation quality for the upcoming adaptation. Some are even expecting Blue Lock levels of production quality. Yikes. But all of that aside, I implore you to give this series a chance. Because I promise you, it's so much more than just another run-of-the-mill trash isekai power fantasy. It's a fun, adventurous story set in a rich, immersive world filled with lovable characters and a badass yet relatable protagonist. If you made it to the end of the video, consider leaving a like, dropping a comment, and subscribing. It helps out a ton and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.